phrase coming to your senses came to me a long while ago. And it was something that I thought initially was maybe it was a conference I was going to do. Then it was some other kind of event that I was going to do. And it was just this phrase that wasn't something actually that I used very often, but it kept coming to my senses over and over again. And the more I reflected on it, the more I could see the amount of different times in my life where when I came to my senses, that's when significant change started to happen. So welcome to today's episode of Coming to Your Senses. And I'm going to talk about a topic that where I really have come to my senses on numerous occasions in different ways. But I want to talk about the first time, the first thing that really changed quite dramatically my life, nearly overnight, in relation to food, or more specifically, my relationship to food. I want to flag up here that I am not a trained nutritionist, dietitian, or health practitioner. But over the last 20 plus years, in various ways, I have looked into this for myself and about my own body and coming to my senses. And what I mean by that in this instance is listening to my body's guidance as to what it needs and what's going to be helpful for it. So let me put this into context. So I'm talking when I was in my mid to late 20s. And at that point, most weeks, I was going to either have takeaways or junk food or fast food at least 3, if not 6 times a week. And sometimes that was lunch and dinner, never breakfast because I didn't really eat breakfast. But it was certainly at least once a day, occasionally twice a day. I frequently had colds. I frequently felt lethargic. I had challenges with my weight. I didn't exercise. I went up and down stairs and I walked to and from my place of work. But that was the limit. I didn't do anything else exercise-wise. That wasn't my bag. So what changed for me was reading a book. And I can't even remember why specifically my boyfriend at the time had got hold of this book. I got a feeling that his sister, who was American, or rather lived in America, gave it to him. And I don't know if he read it and handed it over to me or if I just picked it up and decided to read it. But the book is called Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser. And I don't really think I'd ever read anything like that before. And it was an expose of how the fast food industry in America was impacting the population, and specifically focusing in on the practices that McDonald's had. And in those practices that McDonald's had, and I was a frequent flyer at McDonald's, had been ever since they really came to prominence in the UK. And genuinely didn't think anything was wrong with it because, it's not hurting me, is it really? But reading his expose of there were 2 things that really struck me. Now, before I share them, I do not know if this is still the focus of McDonald's or any other fast food chain. And I don't even know what the current research is. So this is a book from 20 plus 25 years ago, roughly. But the first thing that really struck me was that the marketing strategy was to get a child hooked on going to McDonald's at least once a month as a treat, as a special occasion, because if they could do that, then they're going to hook them. If they can do that every month before the age of 6, then they're going to have them for life. And I thought what struck me at that point was, to me, that's then creating an addict. That's not then about choice. And being somebody who's a very determined mindset, I didn't want to believe I was being manipulated or cajoled into a certain way. I thought I was making that choice. I hadn't realized that potentially I had been conditioned into it inadvertently, by my parents, by society, by the little toys that you got with McDonald's, which is why they partnered up with Disney and Pixar to get those kids hooked in. And make a collection, because you don't just want one, you want the whole collection, right? Um, and that genuinely was a slap around the face, because I didn't think I could be manipulated in that way. I didn't think I was that susceptible, but obviously I was, and it was a real shocker, and it made me think about things a lot. And the second thing was around their practices of how they were treating their staff. And at that point in my life, I was really starting to question my own career, and how, working backstage in theatre and television, we were treated, for the majority of the time, not always, very differently to those that were on the stage. There was different set of rules, different set of what they could get away with versus what we could get away with, different pay structure, all of that sort of thing. And that inequality for me, was playing heavily on my mind. So I think having then reading it in a book that, forced me to see that this was a practice in other areas where people were being unfairly treated in the workplace as well as poorly paid, I had a snap decision of, I never want to go in there again. And I decided I wasn't going to go to any fast food chain at all for a month. And I didn't. And I didn't miss it. So I did another month, and then another month. And in the last 20, 25 or so years, the only time I've been into a McDonald's is once in America about 10 years ago, when my friend that I was with at the time, both of us needed the bathroom, and it was the only place. And all we did was go in, use the bathroom, and leave. I've never been to one since. And it's quite amazing how, to me, coming to my senses in that moment was an expose of things that I was ignoring, either consciously or not consciously ignoring. And it took somebody else, to that book in this instance, to bring something to my attention and into my awareness. Now, that doesn't mean to say that that everyone who read that book stopped going to a McDonald's, because I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. However, it brings something to our awareness. And when we bring something to our awareness, it means then we have a more informed choice. And that's what, for me, that's what's changed so much about my life, is that whatever I'm looking at, whether it in this instance about food, or whether it's about finances, or specifically about my health, or the business, or anything, absolutely anything, the key is bringing awareness to it, is really utilizing all of our sensory information, not just our five senses, but our intuition and our common sense as well. One of my mentors refers to it as the fact that we have seven senses. So our sight, sound, touch, taste, smell are the five that most of us refer to. Intuition, the sixth sense, a lot of people reference as well, but he chucks in the seventh of common sense. And I think that this expose of different things, in this instance around the fast food industry, was something I then couldn't unsee. And as a coach, that's my job, is to expose things. What you do once that thing has been exposed is completely up to you, but it might be about reflecting things back. I was had a conversation with somebody earlier today, and we were talking about the journey that she's been on, and having witnessed that journey over that period of time, 10 years, I could reflect to her where she was and where she is now from my point of view, and what are the differences and the changes that I've seen. And she said without that reflection, without that expose, she wouldn't have been able to see as much of it, because we forget. And throughout all of my life, since reading that book, there have been various things that I just go, yeah, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that. But over time, it becomes something that I don't want to ignore anymore. And as uncomfortable as it might be, as I'm exposing myself or bringing that awareness to that thing, by bringing awareness, it brings choice. So where food is concerned, it's been something that every single year I look at something else, and at least then it's not that I have to remove that thing from my diet or my lifestyle, but it's knowing that when I have it, that I'm having it from an informed perspective as to how that impacts this physical body that I'm in, as well as the people. Because if I'm consuming it, then I'm buying it from somebody else, and what am I feeding over there as well as feeding here? And is that something that I want to do? And I think all of us, books like Fast Food Nation, and one that came out recently in the UK, by Dr. Chris Van Talken, the ultra processed people. I was having a conversation with a client who wanted to start to make some changes in her life, but didn't really know where to start. And I'd heard Dr. Chris, on a number of podcasts. I'd listened to the podcast that him and his brother did about this process. And I knew a lot of the information that he's been sharing. So I mentioned to this particular client, maybe have a read of Ultra Processed People and see what that brings for you. What awareness does it bring? What understanding? And the following month that she came in, her eyes were really bright and she went, that book, oh my gosh. She said, I went food shopping that weekend after I finished it. And when I brought the food home, the first thing I said to my husband is, I think you might be a bit shocked at what's in the bags. And she hadn't gone down this massive, crazy health food streak. But she said what she could not unsee was the information that Dr. Chris shares in Ultra Processed People. The same as for me, I couldn't unsee what I read in Fast Food Nation. And she said, and therefore, there were various things that I would normally have automatically picked up. But this time I picked them up and I read the ingredients. And knowing what I know now, I put them back on the shelf. And she said, that's all I want to do, is I just want to be informed. And to me, that's what this podcast is about. This is what I want to share from various different angles, is the things that have impacted my life, and I've witnessed them impact clients. And it's not that you have to take the same route. It's not that we all have to eat the same way or live the same way, because I think that that's not correct. But I think we could all do with coming to our senses and having an awareness for ourselves as to what's right for us, what's right for this body, what's right for the life that I'm leading, what's right for the life that I want to be leading, what is actually going to be the most common sense for me, rather than following the mainstream or what other people are doing, or what we have subliminally been conditioned into accepting, agreeing, or buying without even thinking. So my invitation, if you choose to accept it, you may not, but my invitation is to simply look at what you consume food-wise over a week. And after you've drunk or eaten anything, within about half an hour afterwards, just check in with your own physical sensations. How do you feel? Uplifted? Do you feel good? Is it feeding your body in a way that's nourishing? And notice whatever you notice. Because when you bring awareness to it for yourself, you can't then unsee it. It takes more effort than to keep hiding it. And that's when you actually have pure choice, rather than it being automatic. You're making then a conscious choice. And please do share in the comments. As I say, I'm not a trained health practitioner or a nutritionist. I certainly know people that are, and I suspect that some of them will be coming on the podcast at some point. At least I hope they will. And I think we can all learn to do this for ourselves. Bring ourselves that piece of awareness as to what is right for us right now that's really going to support us. And I look forward to speaking to you again on another episode very soon.